Welcome to the Taken Hour. As you settle beneath your blankets, let this soft story carry you toward sleep. Gently loosen your shoulders, let your jaw rest, and allow your breathing to slow. If you enjoy drifting off to calm science fiction tales like this, remember to subscribe so there is always another quiet journey waiting for you at night. Now, imagine mountains after sunset, air turning cool, and a small group of tired travelers arriving in a valley of deep, reassuring silence. The mountains are already dark when the travelers finish the winding road and step out into the stillness. The last traces of sunlight fade behind distant ridges, leaving only a smooth band of indigo above. Gravel crunches under their boots, then falls quiet. In that silence, streams murmur somewhere unseen, and pine trees stand like patient guardians. The group speaks softly, voices naturally lowered by the calm. They unload backpacks, stretch stiff legs, and feel the cool, thin air settling on their skin like a gentle veil. They choose a flat patch of grass near an ancient boulder, its surface polished by time and weather. Tents unfurl with a rustle, like slow breaths. Lanterns glow with warm, amber halos, touching only a small circle of earth, and leaving the rest of the valley undisturbed and vast. One traveler, more thoughtful than talkative, pulls out a small recorder. Tonight, the mountain's silence feels like a story that has been waiting a very long time to be told, patient and unhurried beneath the stars. The recorder's tiny light blinks to life. A quiet voice begins an audio diary, speaking for whoever might listen later, or perhaps for no one at all. The voice describes how silence in the mountains feels different from silence in cities. It is alive, filled with tiny hidden sounds, like distant water and leaves whispering. The group finishes setting up, moving slowly, almost reverently. As the voice continues, the mountains seem to lean closer, as if listening, their massive shapes fading into the night's soft embrace. Later, they gather around a low, careful fire. Flames kept small out of respect for the dark. Sparks drift upward like wandering thoughts before disappearing into the sky. The diary records quiet laughter, stories from long drives, and the relief of finally arriving. Someone notes the smell of pine resin warming in the fire's heat, the way smoke curls lazily in the still air. The group's compasses lie forgotten in backpacks, needles resting obediently north, as if nothing unusual could ever happen on such a peaceful night. When the fire settles to glowing coals, they step away to look at the sky. Above them, the stars are so numerous that they seem to blend into a delicate, luminous haze. The valley is shielded from distant towns, so no harsh lights interfere. The diary describes the sensation of standing tiny and safe under an endless ceiling of constellations, as if floating in slow motion. Every breath feels deeper here, every heartbeat slower, as if the mountains are lending their patient rhythm to the travelers. A breeze stirs, barely perceptible, carrying the faint scent of snow lingering on higher peaks. The voice in the recorder notes how the wind sounds like distant ocean waves, even though there is no sea for many miles. They speak softly about tomorrow's hike, tracing routes on crinkled maps, fingertips gliding over contour lines and tiny symbols. In the hush, the paper's rustle is loud. The silence does not feel empty. It feels attentive, receptive, as though the mountains are already gently rearranging their plans for the night. In the tent, the audio diary continues, soft voice muffled by fabric and sleeping bags. The recorder captures the small, comforting sounds of preparation, zippers sliding, blankets settling, the rustle of pages being folded away. Outside, the valley grows darker, deeper, as if sinking into a slower kind of time. The diarist describes the feeling of being held by the landscape, wrapped in its calm, ancient presence. There is no hint yet of what waits above them, patient and almost shy, far beyond the visible stars. Sleep comes gradually. One by one, conversations fade into drowsy murmurs. Outside, insect songs weave a delicate pattern, like tiny bells ringing in irregular, soothing rhythms. The diary is placed beside a pillow, still, its small light finally dimmed. In the distance, a stream keeps flowing over stones, steady and calm. The mountains do not move, yet their presence feels protective, like enormous guardians who never tire. Inside the tent, slow breathing rises and falls. The night grows thicker, settling even more deeply into its own quiet. Sometime after midnight, long after the last ember cools, something subtle changes. The diary is not recording now, yet if it were, it would catch a silence that suddenly feels even more deliberate. The insects pause as though listening. The air takes on a faint, metallic taste, like the memory of thunder. High above the valley, beyond the mountain ridges, a low sound begins, almost too deep for ears, more like a distant pressure. The mountains, long used to stillness, seem to hold their breath. The sound grows slowly, careful not to wake too suddenly. It is not a harsh, metallic roar, not the rumble of planes or engines. Instead, it resembles a long, continuous hum, like a single note sung by a quiet choir at an immense distance. The valley's shadows tremble just slightly, as if responding. Inside the tents, one sleeper shifts, sensing something without fully waking. The hum is not threatening. It feels oddly steady, like a tone intended to soothe, yet it does not belong to anything familiar. Near dawn, the diarist stirs, half awake, feeling an inexplicable heaviness in the air, as if the sky has lowered closer. The hum is faint now, almost imagined, trailing off like a dream. Out of habit, they reach for the recorder and press the button. Sleep-thick words describe an odd sense of being observed, but without any fear, more like being studied gently. As the voice slows and yawns, a compass in a nearby backpack shifts slightly, its needle twitching, then settling, as if testing an unseen current. Morning arrives wrapped in fog. The mountains are veiled, half present, their edges softened into pale shapes. Dew beads on tent fabric and sleeping bags, cool against fingertips. The diary records the first breaths of the day, the way the fog muffles every sound, making speech feel almost unnecessary. They unzip the tent and step into a world that feels newly created, as if the valley has forgotten its details overnight. Birds call cautiously, testing the air. Somewhere in the mist, that deep hum lingers in memory alone. They boil water for tea and coffee, watching the steam curl upward into the already damp air. The diary notes how the fog erases distances, making every sound feel close, intimate. A metal mug warms between cold hands, radiating comfort. One traveler mentions a strange dream of music coming from the sky, a single low note that never quite ended. Others nod sleepily, unsure whether they heard it too. The compasses lie quiet in their pockets, ordinary and obedient, waiting for the day's path to be drawn. The fog slowly thins as the sun climbs, revealing slopes painted with moss, stone, and patches of hardy flowers. The group spreads out maps again, deciding on a trail that skirts the valley's edge and rises toward a ridge with a wide view. The diary captures their easy anticipation, the pleasure of moving through quiet terrain. A compass is checked casually, its needle pointing north as expected. Boots are laced, straps tightened, and the soft crunch of footsteps begins. High above, something listens, adjusting its distance. They walk in single file along a narrow path that winds between rocks and clusters of shrubs. The air is cool but gentle, never harsh. The diary describes the rhythm of walking, the steady pattern of breath, the measured placement of feet on uneven ground, the soft tapping of trekking poles. Occasionally, they stop to admire the way light pours through breaks in the cloud cover, painting moving shapes across the opposite cliffs. The mountains, once distant, now feel closer, as if the group is being drawn inward. As they gain elevation, the valley spreads below like a shallow, breathing bowl. The campsite is a tiny cluster of colors against the vast green and gray. The diary notes how quiet it becomes when they stop speaking. The wind barely moves, too gentle to disturb the loose stones at their feet. One traveler pulls out a compass again, more out of habit than need. The needle swings, hesitates, and then settles. It is subtle, an almost invisible delay, quickly forgotten as they admire the distant, shimmering peaks. Around midday, clouds thicken, gathering into smooth layers that mute the light. The temperature drops, but only slightly, enough to raise a pleasant shiver. They sit on a flat rock to eat, listening to the dull, comforting crunch of food and the occasional clink of utensils. The diary describes how the sky looks heavier, as though something unseen is pressing gently downward. Once again, a compass is consulted. This time, the needle turns more lazily, circling a little too far before drifting back toward north, as if distracted. They exchange puzzled glances, but shrug it off. Magnetic quirks happen in mountains, someone recalls. Rocks, minerals, old stories of wandering needles. The explanation feels sufficient enough for daylight. The diary records a short laugh and the soft crinkle of wrappers. When they stand to continue, the air seems thicker, like water flowing slowly around them, though they move easily. Far above the clouds, beyond ordinary sky, the source of the earlier hum adjusts again. Curious, its presence crossing paths with the invisible lines that guide compasses. The path narrows as it approaches a saddle between two ridges. On one side, the valley drops away into forest. On the other, cliffs fall sharply toward a hidden river. The diary describes the feeling of standing between heights, as though suspended. The group pauses again to gauge direction. This time, when the compass appears, the needle begins to tremble in small, nervous arcs, refusing to rest. North slides ack and forth, never quite steady. The air grows even quieter, so still that their own breathing sounds loud. They try another compass from a different pocket, expecting reassurance. This second needle behaves worse, circling once, twice, then spinning slowly, as though an invisible hand has set it adrift. The diary captures the moment one traveler laughs softly, not out of fear, but out of disbelief. It is the kind of laugh people make when reality nudges them from behind. A faint vibration passes through the rock under their boots, subtle as a distant train. Yet there are no tracks, no roads, nothing but mountains in every direction. The hum returns, low and smooth, just under the threshold of ordinary hearing. They feel it more than hear it, a slow wave that seems to arrive through the soles of their feet and rise into their chests. The diary voice now speaks in a quieter, more deliberate tone, describing how their hearts respond by slowing, not racing. It is as if the sound is a kind of lullaby, meant not to alarm, but to prepare. The compasses keep turning, their needles circling in patient, unhurried loops. They sit down on the saddle, letting their legs dangle toward empty space, as if the safest response to the unexplainable is to rest. The hum continues, becoming a barely perceptible vibration that settles into their bones like a steady, reassuring pulse. The diary narrator speaks about letting go of the need to understand everything. Wind passes over them in a long, even breath, though no gust is strong enough to chill. The compasses, placed between them on the rock, spin in perfect synchrony, slow and graceful. After a while, they notice that time feels different. The diary notes how the sun seems hesitant to move, balancing near the same patch of cloud while shadows remain almost unchanged. Minutes stretch into something softer and rounder, not measured but felt. The hum rises slightly, becoming clearer, like a single tone from an instrument made of air and starlight. It is neither loud nor quiet. It simply is. The compasses respond by slowing their spin, but never stopping, as though circling a point beyond any mapped direction. One of them suggests that perhaps they should turn back toward the valley, not out of panic, but from a sense that something important is waiting there. The diary narrator agrees softly, describing a pull that is not physical but unmistakable, like remembering a forgotten promise. They stand and gather their things with calm, unhurried motions. As they begin to descend, the hum shifts again, following them at a distance, staying always just beyond direct perception. The spinning compasses are gently placed into pockets, still unsettled, yet strangely trusted. The trail downward feels easier than before, as though gravity itself is cooperating. The diary records how each step seems cushioned, stones less sharp, inclines less steep. The hum blends with the sounds of the landscape, trickling water, occasional rustle of wings, the creak of old branches. It is not an intruder, but an added layer to the familiar mountain song. The compasses, when briefly checked, still refuse obedience, their needles tracing slow, hypnotic paths, like dancers circling a point no eye can see. Back in the valley, the campsite appears exactly as they left it, yet something feels subtly rearranged, like returning to a room where a picture has been straightened. The diary narrator describes an odd feeling of recognition, as though the place has been expecting them. The air is still, the sky a soft gray dome. When they lay the compasses on the ancient boulder, the needles immediately whirl, spinning faster now, then slowing together, as if greeting some unseen arrival. The hum deepens, smooth and strangely comforting. They form a loose circle around the boulder, speaking in low voices, careful not to disturb whatever is unfolding. The diary captures questions spoken more as curiosities than fears. What could be affecting every compass at once? Why does the vibration feel so soothing instead of alarming? As they watch, the needles slow again, all pointing not north, but upward, angled toward the sky above the valley. The hum becomes steady, like a held note. A quiet agreement passes among them. They will stay and see what happens. Evening drifts in, painting the valley with layers of shadow and silver. The group rekindles a small fire, though its warmth now feels secondary to the strange presence above. The diary describes how the sky seems thicker, as if someone has added an invisible layer between the clouds and the stars. The hum never wavers, neither loud nor soft, simply constant, like a heartbeat scaled to mountain size. Every now and then they glance at the compasses, noting how the needles remain fixed on some unseen point overhead. As true night settles, the first stars emerge, smaller and more distant than before, as though viewed through a veil. The diary narrator speaks more slowly, inviting whoever listens to match their breathing to the hum, to let it carry away leftover tension. The mountains around them are now solid silhouettes against the sky, unmoving but attentive. Between the ordinary stars, faint, blurred glows begin to appear, like lanterns glimpsed through fog. They do not flicker or move quickly. They simply grow a little brighter, patiently. The travelers lie back on sleeping pads and blankets, shoulders nearly touching, eyes turned upward. The diary captures the soft rhythm of their breathing and the quiet crackle of the fire. Above them, the indistinct glows slowly resolve into clearer shapes, though still distant and hazy. They are not sharp like aircraft lights, not blinking or darting. Instead, they resemble softly lit seeds drifting in a slow, deliberate orbit high above the valley. The compasses on the boulder remain tilted toward them, perfectly still at last. The diary narrator whispers about how peaceful the lights feel, as if the sky itself has grown curious and leaned closer. The hum shifts slightly, now carrying a subtle pattern, like syllables spoken too slowly to recognize as words. It is not language in any familiar sense, yet it feels intentional. The travelers close their eyes, listening more with their bodies than their ears. The mountains, once mere stone, now seem to be part of a larger listening, their slopes acting as enormous, patient ears tuned to the sky. One by one, images begin to surface behind their closed eyelids. The diary voice, barely above a murmur, describes how these images feel like borrowed memories rather than dreams. They see other valleys under other skies, strange constellations, oceans of mist moving across unfamiliar landscapes. Each vision is suffused with the same calm intention as the hum, a presence that observes without judgment. The compasses, forgotten on the boulder, would now show their needles pulsing gently, tiny movements echoing unseen shapes slowly circling above the mountains. Time slips further from its usual shape. The diary records pauses that stretch into long silences, broken only by the hum and the occasional sigh. No one feels sleepy in the ordinary way. Instead, they feel suspended in a waking rest, as if the valley has become a cradle. The lights above grow larger, but not brighter, their glow remaining soft and non-intrusive. They seem careful, almost polite, approaching slowly so as not to disturb delicate human nerves unused to visitors who travel without wings or engines. A thought rises at the edge of their awareness, shaped not by words but by feeling, an invitation. The diary narrator attempts to describe it, speaking of a gentle nudge inside the chest, as though someone has knocked softly on the door to each heart. There is no demand, only a question. Will you listen? As the hum continues, their earlier curiosity deepens into acceptance. They sense that whatever shares this valley now has traveled far, perhaps through layers of space that bend like fog between distant peaks. The diary captures them speaking quietly about trust. They talk about times when they have stood at the edge of unknown paths and chosen to walk forward anyway, relying on instinct. This feels similar, yet larger, as though an entire species is standing at such an edge. The hum adds a delicate overtone, like a second note joining the first. The compasses remain still, pointing upward, suggesting that, for the moment, the only meaningful direction is not north or south, but simply toward whatever is listening above. Gradually, shapes begin to emerge within the glowing forms. They do not resemble familiar machines with hard lines or visible engines. Instead, the lights condense into smooth, organic outlines, like shells made of softened metal and mist, hovering in a loose cluster high above the valley floor. The diary narrator describes them as seeds of light, not ships, though the distinction feels unimportant. Their motion is exquisitely slow, respectful of the quiet place they have entered. The hum now carries a faint echo, as though answering itself. The diary voice lowers further, guiding listeners to imagine each breath as a bridge between bodies and the lights above. On the inhale, they draw in the calm gathered over unimaginable distances. On the exhale, they release tension, fear, old thoughts that no longer fit. The presence above responds, its glow subtly pulsing in harmony with their breathing, though no one speaks about it aloud. Words feel too blunt for what is happening. Instead, silence becomes the language they use to say yes. The hum differentiates into gentle patterns, like ripples in a still lake. Inside their minds, sensations emerge, neither quite images nor thoughts. The feeling of cold starlight passing over smooth surfaces. The silence of empty space, richer than any sound. The patience required to cross distances that dwarf mountains and oceans together. The diary narrator whispers that it feels as if the visitors are sharing memories, not to impress or overwhelm, but simply to say, "This is where we have been." The valley seems to widen in response. Someone lifts a hand toward the sky, not in demand, but as a greeting. The motion feels small compared to the vastness above, yet it is enough. One of the luminous shapes lowers slightly, its glow intensifying only by a small degree, careful not to glare. The diary captures a collective intake of breath, followed by a release that sounds almost like relief. The compasses tremble, then align their needles toward this single descending glow. The hum curves in tone, like a bowed string finding a harmonious note. Within the glow, more detail becomes visible. There are no windows, no markings, nothing resembling weapons or tools. Instead, the surface appears subtly textured, like layers of mineral and light intertwined. The diary narrator explains that being near it feels like standing beside a waterfall made of quiet, its presence washing over them in waves of calm. The air around the valley grows cooler, but not harsh, like a room where the temperature has been adjusted for comfort. The mountains remain still, their shadows attentive and accepting. The diary voice describes a new sensation, one that does not come through ears or eyes. It is as if a second tide of awareness has entered their bodies, rising and falling very gently. Thoughts become softer at the edges, losing their sharpness. Old worries loosen their grip and drift away like leaves on slow water. At the same time, there is an unmistakable sense of being seen clearly, like standing under a kind, steady gaze that notices everything, yet judges nothing. The hum settles into a comforting baseline. Memories rise. Childhood walks under different skies. First glimpses of distant hills. Nights spent listening to rain on roofs. The visitors seem to touch these memories lightly, tracing their outlines without entering. The diary narrator likens it to someone reading titles on the spines of books without opening them. In return, new impressions arrive. Skies with 3 pale moons, forests of glassy structures humming with quiet energy, rivers that drift upward before curving back to the ground. All of it feels strangely familiar, as if remembered rather than newly discovered. Every so often, one of them opens their eyes and checks the compasses. The needles now move with a slow, synchronized rhythm, sweeping in arcs that match some unseen pattern above. The diary notes how, instead of causing alarm, this coordination feels reassuring, like watching clock hands in a room where time itself has become gentle. They realize that direction, in the usual sense, has little meaning here. The important alignment is not geographical, but emotional. A quiet agreement between beings who have just begun to understand each other. Hours may pass, or minutes. The diary cannot say. The fire burns low, then out. Yet no one feels cold. The visiting forms adjust their altitude with small, considerate motions, never rushing, never coming so close as to overwhelm. The hum now carries faint harmonies, as if multiple voices are blending into chords. The diary narrator speaks about how this night will be difficult to describe later with ordinary language. Yet, in this moment, it feels simple. The mountains, the humans, and the visitors share the same deep quiet. Eventually, a subtle shift occurs in the visitor's presence, like the soft intake of breath before a farewell. The hum gains a faint upward curve, the musical equivalent of standing up from a long, comfortable rest. The diary narrator senses that the moment of closest contact is approaching, not as a dramatic climax, but as the gentle turning point of a conversation. They sit up, stretch slowly, and look toward the closest luminous form, which descends another small distance until it seems to hover just above the boulder of spinning compasses. The compasses suddenly stop their graceful arcs and freeze, needles pointing not only upward, but in slightly different angles, as if sketching the outline of something invisible in the air between them and the light. The diary narrator describes the sense that a bridge has fully formed now, an open channel. Without warning, yet without any jolt, each traveler feels a single, clear message, as simple and unadorned as a breath. You are not alone. It arrives without drama, settling into their hearts like a quietly placed stone. Tears slip down one face, not from sadness or fear, but from the sudden easing of a long-held tension no one had realized they carried. The diary narrator's voice trembles slightly while remaining calm, describing how the idea of loneliness loosens like a knot finally untied. each traveler senses that somewhere, far beyond these mountains, other beings rest under different skies, sharing similar quiets. The hum swells just a little, then fades back, as though acknowledging the understanding. The valley feels even more spacious than before. At some unspoken signal, they all lie back again, letting their bodies sink into the ground's steady support. The diary narrator speaks of gratitude for the mountains, for the strangers in the sky, for the chance to be awake in such an unlikely moment. A delicate flicker passes through the glowing forms overhead, like a ripple of shared emotion. The compasses release their rigid pattern and begin once more to move, though now in slow, soothing loops that feel less like distortion and more like a gentle, ongoing goodbye. The hum softens until it becomes indistinguishable from the background silence. In its place remains a sensation, like the afterglow of warmth on skin long after a fire has gone out. The diary narrator notes that the visitors seem to be ascending, not in a straight line, but like seeds carried upward by a very gentle wind. Their lights thin and elongate, gradually blending into the stars that have watched this meeting. The mountains, unchanged yet subtly renewed, stand witness as the valley returns to its normal night sounds. Eventually, the campfire's last coal fades completely, leaving only starlight and the faint glow from lanterns half-zipped into tents. The diary captures the rustle of sleeping bags accepting tired bodies again. No one speaks loudly. Words feel fragile after so much shared silence. The compasses are gathered and placed carefully inside, their faces now ordinary, needles pointing calmly north. The valley breathes steadily, its streams and insects resuming their familiar patterns, as if the night had been briefly stretched and then allowed to settle back into place around them. Sleep comes more quickly this time, slipping over them like a soft blanket woven from everything they have just experienced. The diary narrator, fighting drowsiness, records a few final impressions. The feeling of being gently held by a presence that has now gone elsewhere. The sense that the valley remembers what happened and will keep it safe. Outside, the sky looks normal again, yet feels permanently altered. The mountains hold the memory in their silent slopes, and the air retains a faint echo of the hum, now folded into its stillness. Dawn returns without drama. The first light touches the peaks with pale gold, then spills slowly into the valley. The diary records yawns, stretches, and the ordinary sounds of a campsite waking. Zippers, boiling water, the soft clink of metal cups. Yet under these small noises, there is a new quiet, deeper than before, as if something has settled into the ground itself. They exchange glances that need no explanation. They do not rush to speak of the night, believing that words can wait until they leave the mountains. When they finally talk about what happened, they do so gently, like handling something fragile and precious. The diary narrator notes how each person remembers slightly different details. The exact shade of the lights, the shapes within the glow, the specific images offered by the visitors. Yet all agree on the feeling, profound calm, and the unmistakable sense of being quietly acknowledged. They check the compasses again. Every needle points reliably north, as if nothing unusual ever occurred. The mountains observe in their usual patient silence. They begin to pack, movements unhurried. The diary records the sound of tent poles collapsing, fabric folding, backpacks being zipped. Each object seems slightly different now, not in shape, but in meaning. Tools carried by beings who are no longer convinced that they travel alone in the universe. Before leaving, they gather around the boulder one last time, placing their palms on its cool surface. The stone holds the memory of spinning needles and hovering lights, but says nothing. Its silence is not refusal. It is protection. The diary narrator speaks softly into the recorder as they walk toward the trail that leads back to roads, towns, and familiar noise. They describe how each step feels like crossing an invisible boundary, moving from a place where the sky opened into something vast and gentle, back toward a world of schedules and clocks. Yet the calm earned in the valley does not fade. It moves with them, settling into their posture, their breathing, the quiet way they meet each other's eyes. The mountains recede, but remain within them. Though the visitors have gone, the compasses occasionally twitch in their pockets, tiny reminders that invisible currents still move around them. The diary narrator imagines those luminous forms continuing on, passing above other valleys, other sleepers who may or may not awaken to notice. The thought is comforting rather than lonely. It suggests a network of quiet encounters, scattered like stars across worlds. The hum is no longer audible, but sometimes, in pauses between footsteps, they almost sense it, like the faint echo of a song remembered from childhood. They reach the place where the road reappears, a curved strip of asphalt cutting through grass and gravel. The diary captures the contrast between the engine's eventual rumble and the deep quiet they are leaving behind. Even so, the sound of machinery feels less intrusive now, merely another layer in the world's many voices. As they load their packs into the vehicle, someone glances back at the mountains one last time. For a brief moment, the sunlight glints off a distant slope in a way that resembles a departing glow. When the vehicle starts and rolls slowly away, the diary narrator speaks about gratitude once more. Gratitude for having been awake at the right time, in the right place, with the right people. The road winds downward, carrying them toward a busier landscape. Yet the memory of the valley's silence travels alongside, like an unseen passenger. Occasionally, they fall quiet together, eyes on the horizon, as if listening for a hum they cannot quite hear anymore, but know with quiet certainty still exists somewhere above other mountains. Later, far from the valley, the diary is played back in a small, dimly lit room. The narrator's voice fills the space, carrying the sounds of streams, wind, and that strange, low hum in the background. Listeners close their eyes and imagine the mountains holding a quiet night in their enormous hands. Even without seeing the lights, they feel some portion of the calm transmitted through the recording, like warmth radiating from a stone long after the sun has set. The story becomes a soft bridge between places. The diary narrator, listening along with the others, realizes that the encounter has become something else now, a shared lullaby. The hum, captured imperfectly, still carries enough of its original intention to ease shoulders, slow breath, and uncoil tired thoughts. The mountains, though distant, are present in every pause of the recording. The visitors, wherever they are, remain as a quiet possibility, behind every starlit sky. They no longer need to be seen to be believed. Their existence is woven into the memory of one silent valley. On future nights, when sleep is difficult, the narrator presses play again, letting their own earlier words guide them back to that valley. Each time, new small details emerge. The pattern of crickets returning after the hum faded. The way stones felt warmer under their hands after the visitors rose. The shape of shadows on the boulder. The visitors themselves remain a gentle presence at the edge of thought, like distant lights seen through mist. The story does not grow sharper. It becomes softer, more like a familiar dream. In time, the narrator learns to carry the valley within simple daily moments. Standing in line, sitting on a train, watching clouds drift over city rooftops. The diary's words echo silently, reminding them how the mountains felt when they shared space with something vast and kind. The compasses, kept now as quiet mementos, behave predictably, yet their faces hold the memory of spinning under an unfamiliar sky. Each ordinary sunrise becomes a small version of that night's revelation. The universe is larger and more gentle than it sometimes appears. Eventually, the narrator returns to the mountains, not to seek another encounter, but simply to sit once more in the valley's quiet. The diary, older now, accompanies them. The campsite is gone, reclaimed by grass and time, but the boulder remains, steadfast and familiar. They sit beside it, recorder in hand, and begin a new entry. Their voice, calm and steady, tells of how the memory has become a gentle weight in their life, something that anchors rather than unsettles. The mountains listen as they always have. They speak about how fear, once loud, has grown quieter over the years, replaced by a quieter respect for the unknown. The visitors are not worshipped or feared. They are simply understood as part of a larger pattern, like distant weather systems moving high above. The diary narrator thanks them aloud, not expecting an answer. Even so, for a brief moment, the air seems to thicken with a very familiar calm. The compasses, resting on the boulder for old time's sake, twitch in tiny, nearly imperceptible arcs. As evening returns to the valley once more, shadows stretch long, and the first stars appear above the ridges. The narrator ends the new entry by describing the mountains as they are now, silent, patient, and gently marked by a night when others shared their sky. The recorder whirs softly, capturing the hush. The compasses finally rest, needles pointing north with quiet dignity. The valley exhales, folds itself into darkness, and holds everything that has happened in its vast, remembering silence. The last words recorded are simple. They came down.